So most of us know DomsNums, right? You think of them, you immediately think of numbers, life graphs, numerology. But behind all those complex calculations, there's actually a totally different side to him, a poet. Welcome to this explainer on DomDom's deeply reflective poetry collection, My Passing Time. This isn't about data at all. We're going on a real journey through Africa, looking at struggle, memory, peace, and ultimately self-discovery. We're going to explore exactly how DomDom turns time into numbers and then turns those numbers into incredibly powerful stories. Now, this collection isn't just your standard book of poems. It really reads more like a personal diary, just these incredibly sharp observations gathered during really quiet moments. And it's honestly fascinating how he takes what you or I might just brush off as ordinary passing time and he completely transforms it. He turns those fleeting moments into extraordinary stories of heritage and struggle and peace. It's a great reminder that to really reflect on life, you actually have to slow down first. To really wrap our heads around this collection, we're going to follow his deliberate four-part journey. We'll look at the friction of the present, the cycles of time, our ancestral roots, and finally, we'll arrive at Nutafefa, which is this profound sense of stillness. So, let's jump right into phase one, the friction of the present, where we are examining historical and cultural disruption in Africa. Right out of the gate, the journey begins by confronting what he calls the noise. It asks some pretty difficult questions, like what actually happened to African identity? In the poem Pretext, DomDom maps out these two colliding realities, and he does it so impartially. On one side, you have the historical arrival of outsiders. He describes them as aliens searching for resources to feed starving industries. But then, on the flip side, he shows us what the African forefathers inherently possessed. Things like profound godliness, this incredibly complex knowledge, and just the immense physical wealth of their lands and waters. And he really challenges the historical narratives we've all inherited by starkly mapping out these massive shifts. He writes, "To our godliness came religion, to our knowledge came globalization, to our strength came slavery." He shows exactly how these complex external systems were essentially overlaid onto the continent. How imported religion replaced a pre-existing godliness, how globalization overshadowed ancient local knowledge, and how physical strength was literally exploited into slavery. It is just this unflinching poetic accounting of historical disruption. But here's the thing, this friction, it's not just stuck in the past, it's still happening right now. DomDom looks at modern identity with a really sharp critical eye. He calls out the black preacher for labeling ancient forefathers as barbaric, and he points out the pure irony of the youth in Accra today, literally walking around in thick winter clothes while under the blazing hot African sun. He calls them Generation NHL. It just perfectly captures that illusion of a younger generation adopting foreign cultures while totally losing touch with their own roots. Moving on to Phase 2, Cycles of Time and Trial, which explores the calendar year of human endurance. So, here the scope shifts. We go from that broad, sweeping historical noise down into the deeply personal struggles we all face. Using poems like May Day and The Half Piece, he actually tracks our emotional trials month by month. We start off with the coldness of January, we find those warm hands in February, but man, by May, there are literal cries for help, Mayday. June brings this heavy feeling of a stolen half-piece of the year. It's a brilliant way of showing us that life absolutely is not a straight line. It's seasons, right? It's hope, it's disappointment, it's falling down and rising right back up. But thankfully, the cycle does have a destination. Think about the Maydays in your own life, those times you were just completely overwhelmed. This poetry grounds us by promising that every single struggle is temporary. As he puts it, December already knows the strong finishing. It's a promise that every unfinished, stolen piece of your year can actually become whole again, leading you right to a full piece by the time the year ends. Which brings us to Phase 3, the ancestral anchor, where we're reconnecting with mothers, ancestors, and self. Behind every dream, behind every generation, there's always an anchor. And more often than not, that anchor is maternal. The poet really honors the mother figure here. He calls her a woman of steel, working the shallot fields and the weekly markets. He thanks her for her endless prayers, and crucially, for being the very first person to open his eyes to the beauty and the wonders of Africa. It's just this incredibly moving tribute to the sheer strength of the black woman. But he also looks beyond the maternal to honor his literary ancestors. He dedicates a really powerful piece to the renowned Ghanaian poet, Kofi Awanor. DomDom actually elevates him, calling him a thunder warrior. It's this beautiful recognition of the thinkers and the fighters who paved the way for the rest of us, the people whose works are literally mourned and celebrated by Mother Africa herself. And all of these ancestral ties kind of culminate in a poem called The Portrait. Here, he explores identity as this massive, complex, living masterpiece. It perfectly blends all these contradictions. It's ancient yet modern. It's shady yet clear, with skin that is so Western and yet so black. On the surface, it's a portrait of a mystery woman, but when you really look at it, it's actually a reflection of one's own self, shaped by all of these intersecting histories.
And finally, we arrive at Phase 4, Nudafafa, the stillness. This is all about arriving at ultimate peace and creativity. So after all that historical noise, the brutal yearly struggles, and that deep dive into personal identity, everything finally fades into Nutifafa, absolute stillness. The poem Passing Time captures this perfectly. Picture this, resting under the shade of a tree, watching the hot sunset, just listening to a little stereo echoing noiseless music. It gives us this one vital lesson. Passing time is not wasting time. Passing time is how you discover yourself.
He actually outlines this beautiful progression of what happens when we just allow ourselves to pass the time. When the daily grind of survival finally pauses, silence becomes king. And then that silence wakes up sleep. Sleep turns into passion. And that passion, that leads to true creativity. Stillness isn't empty space, folks. It's the fertile ground where our absolute best ideas are born. The collection wraps up by bringing that turbulent 12-month calendar we looked at earlier completely full circle. It lands in this wonderful space of enduring kindness, bravery, and peace. He writes, December came with smiles. Smiles came with Nutifafa. All the struggles of the previous months are just washed away by the arrival of this deep, grounding stillness. DomsNums truly reveals a whole other dimension of himself here. It's not about numbers. It's not about life graphs. It's about words. Words that remember, words that heal, and words that inspire. As we wrap up this explainer on My Passing Time, I want to leave you with this final thought. Amidst all your own historical noise and the ups and downs of your own yearly struggles, how will you discover your stillness? In the noise of modern life, how will you find your passing time?